Okay.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first Free Press Book Club meeting of 2023. And we're going to be discussing The Theory of Crows, which you can't see because I'm blurred. My name is Erin Lebar. I'm your book club admin. We'll do just a quick round of introductions. We have our literary editor, Ben Sigurdson, joining us tonight. We have Angela Torgerson from McNally Robinson. And of course, we have our author, David Robertson. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So just before we continue, I want to acknowledge that we're all joining you from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Tonight's meeting will go as it always does. Angela will do a brief intro, then David will do a reading, and then we'll jump right into the Q&A, which will be led by Ben. And that's everything for me, so I will throw over to Angela to get things going.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. David, Erin, and Ben, and everyone else participating in tonight's book club at home. And a huge thank you once again to the Winnipeg Free Press for gathering us all together this evening to listen to David read from his stunning novel, The Theory of Crows, and take some time out of his very hectic schedule to chat with us. So, how to introduce David Alexander Robertson? David Alexander Robertson is an author, lives in Winnipeg with his family, and a member of the Norway House Cree Nation. He is a two-time Governor General Award-winning author for his picture books, When We Were Alone and On the Trapline, both filled with words and rich and vivid illustrations by artist Julie Flett. He has also recently become an editorial director of a new imprint with Tundra Books, and he's our best friend at McNally Robinson. He is one of our most beloved authors and just a wonderful, wonderful asset to have in our literary community. When we're planning our seasons here at McNally Robinson, it's never a question of, does David have a book coming out this fall or this spring or this summer or this winter? It's a question of, when are we launching a book for David this year? David has published 25 books so far, from children's books to YA graphic novels, to his celebrated and award-winning middle years series, The Mystical Saga. To see the enthusiasm, especially with that saga, that the middle school readers have for this series, the anticipation and the countdown to a new book coming out, is what exactly makes telling David's books so very much fun. Tonight we are here to discuss his first adult novel, The Theory of Crows, which has gone on to become a local, for us, bestseller and a national bestseller. And it's a beautiful novel that introduces us to an unforgettable moment in the lives of a father and a teenage daughter as they try to come to terms with an unbearable loss and their struggle to find their way back to each other at a time when they need one another most. Their journey takes us through twists and turns and emotions as they return to the land in search of family and tradition and each other. And we are also very excited and grateful to you, David, for speaking to us about it tonight.
Thank you.
So without
Angela.
further ado, I introduce David Alexander Robertson.
Thanks, Angela. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to be doing this. I would say that McNally's is my favorite bookstore in the world. So we've had a long relationship. I was just telling the folks here that before we started that I was going through my old keepsakes, and as I found this old promo for a launch that I did for a book I self-published about 24 years ago. And it's a bad book, but but McNally, they treated me like I was, the most important author in the world, and I always remember that. I remember starting to read and the launch beginning, and Prairie Fire Restaurant was full. They'd done so much promotion for it. They got local media there, and I just felt like that's the first time I really felt like an author. And anyway, I always remember that, and McNally's has been very close to my heart ever since. So, and Ben, you're just super cute. So,
don't watch it. I'm going to make you read from that novel if you don't.
Oh, please don't. So what I'll do is I guess I'm just doing a reading to start, right? So I thought I'll do a reading from. I'm going to do a reading from Theory of Crows in a section I haven't read from publicly before, because I feel like I want to mix it up a little bit. And so the novel is about Holly or Hallelujah and Matthew. So Matthew's Holly's daughter, Holly's father, and their relationship is very strained. Matthew has completely pulled himself away from his family because of his own personal struggles. And he's also looked to fill this kind of emptiness that he feels in his life with things that are unhealthy. And it's caused an enormous strain as well in his marriage. And so this scene I'm going to read is just, it's a quiet scene, but I think it's a good example of things that are said without being said. And the tension that is between the two of them, Claire and Matthew, in their marriage. And it's just them standing together in a kitchen, having a conversation. So I'm gonna read a couple pages from that for you. So this is.
Do you have a page number in case people want to read along with you?
Yeah, sure. It's on page 129.
I know some people like that.
Yeah, after the editorial break, it's on page 129. That's what I'm going to start from. So I'll give you a second to get there if you have the book with you, and then I will read it. Yeah, and some of these, I mean, when I edit these books with my editors, I read a lot of it out loud, but I haven't read it, to people yet, this part, which I always find fun. I was actually able to read parts of the book for the audiobook. And maybe I'll tell you a bit more about that story after, but this is not one of those parts. So anyway, I'm going to find this fun. So here we go. Matthew arrived home to find his food on the dining room table. Claire and Holly had long since finished their supper. He sat in the quiet and thought about how it was no quieter than when his wife and daughter were at the table with him, no lonelier. Claire had made pizza. He took one bite, chewed, then spit it out on his plate. Pizza tasted better hot or cold, and this slice was room temperature. Maybe he just wasn't hungry. Maybe nothing would have tasted good to him. The light in the kitchen was off and the dishwasher was running. He scraped his food into the garbage and placed his plate into the sink. He leaned over and sipped water straight from the faucet. When he stood up, a drop of water rolled from his bottom lip down his chin. He wiped it away with his sleeve. There was a gust of wind outside that blew snow off the neighbor's roof. The snow fell in slow motion in front of the kitchen window. When the light hit the snowflakes, they looked like 1,000 falling stars, like new constellations. Matthew tried to make shapes out of them, as people did with clouds, but they were gone before he could think of one. He flicked the light on. Outside, it looked pitch black and endless. When Matthew was a child, he'd had insomnia. He'd wander the house, but always end up by windows, always windows. He'd stare up at the sky, at the stars. His father used to tell him sky stories when he took him back to bed, but there were no stars tonight. He held up his hand and looked at his palm, looked at all the tiny lines, the countless lines. There was one that curled around the base of his thumb. A girl with red hair and braids had inspected his palm once. She traced that line with her index finger and looked up at him with great concern. "That's your lifeline," she whispered, as though stunned to near silence. "So?" he said. "Well, don't you see how short it is?" she said. She told him that he was going to die young. The lines were as small to him as he was to the world, as the world was to the universe, as the universe was to eternity. Standing over the sink with the darkness outside the window, he felt crushed by the weight of it all. "You're home late." Matthew glanced to the left, where he could see Claire's reflection in the glass. He'd been so preoccupied with his own thoughts that he'd not noticed her enter the kitchen. He didn't know how long she'd been standing there. Her body language matched her tone of voice. Her arms were crossed. She was leaning against the wall, as far from him as she could get without actually leaving the room. And she wasn't even looking at him. It had gotten so bad that wherever she thought he'd been, she either didn't care or was too disgusted at him to look him in the eyes. "I know." Matthew pressed his palms against the kitchen counter, leaning forward. His palms curved around the contour edge. He stared at the plate in the kitchen sink, the swipe marks his fork had made from shoveling the pizza into the garbage. Where were you? Only then did she turn toward him. He could feel her eyes on him. He could feel them, sad and pleading and angry all at once. She thought she knew already and was seeking honesty, confirmation. It made the hair at the back of his neck stand, as though a chill had come into the room. She was wrong, though. I was at work. He turned on the water. He turned the water to hot. He watched the water, slowly rising in temperature, spill over the streaks of pizza sauce, those tiny lines left behind by his fork. He wasn't sure how long he'd been standing there. He wasn't sure if the sauce had dried onto the plate's porcelain surface. He picked up the scrub brush, dripped dish soap onto the plate, and scoured it gleaming white. He replaced the scrub brush beside the sink. The water continued to run. I just got zoned out, that's all. Zoned out. He watched her body shift. She uncrossed and recrossed her arms. She shook her head. You weren't. Her voice cracked slightly. She looked away from him. I mean, no, I wasn't. The water was hot now. Steam rose from the sink. Water hit the plate and spat across the counter. She hated when that happened. She hated when he got the counter wet and didn't dry it. The kitchen window had misted over. It blurred Claire's reflection. She was smeared pastel. She was a figure in a Monet painting, an artist impression of her. I never did. He looked at her, clear and defined and distant. He looked at her reflection. He turned off the water. He reached to the side and grabbed a dish towel. He wiped away the water on the counter and dried the plate. He placed it beside the sink on the marble countertop. Why didn't you say anything about her? Were you waiting for me to bring it up? Like it's my responsibility? Maybe. Matthew picked up the plate, walked over to the kitchen cabinet, opened it, and put the dish away. He turned to face her and leaned against the counter. He mimicked her body language and crossed his arms and looked away. I don't know. It's like you. Claire shook her head again and shook loose tears. He saw them falling down her cheeks. She wiped them away hurriedly, then recrossed her arms. It's like you saw me cut and you just let me keep bleeding. She looked at him. Her eyes were glistening against her will. She was still crying, but not wiping the tears away. It's like you cut me. I'm sorry. Kathy had said sorry to Claire 1,000,000 times over the course of their relationship, and most of the time he'd meant it. Claire hated apologies. She hated them more than the act for which somebody was apologizing. She had told him and Holly that apologies didn't matter. It wasn't the word, it was the action that mattered. That's what she'd always said about the smallest things. Don't say sorry about not leaving me with enough gas in the car. Just make sure you fill up at night if I'm going out in the morning. She said the same about him leaving dirty dishes in the sink when you could have just cleaned them or put them in the dishwasher. That's what she'd always said about the big things too. He took a few steps toward her and stopped in the middle of the kitchen, the track lighting directly overhead. I was thinking about you. I was thinking about everything I've been putting you and Hallelujah through the last. How long had it been? How long had it really been? It's been a long fucking time, Matt. It's been too long. Claire uncrossed her legs, pressed the sole of one foot against the wall and slid it up. The thin rip in her jeans over her left knee widened. Matthew could see her skin peek out from between the blue fabric and spiderweb threads. He used to notice these things about her. He used to notice every detail, the smallest things. Maybe let's just stop there.
That was great. I guess the first, like I last time I spoke to you was actually at the book launch for this, which I hosted, which was tons of fun. And you are strangely much taller than I anticipated, but that was great fun. And it was at McNally, obviously, and it was a great opportunity to talk about the book and talk about your writing and stuff like that. But it was right around the time that it came out, so we couldn't really get into too many specifics. So maybe hopefully we can get into a few more specifics this time. But I do remember you talking a little bit about the audiobook component of the Theory of Crows, and how sort of the process that you went through sort of in sort of figuring all of that stuff out. If you want to just sort of touch on that before we dive right into it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was, for me, I knew Matt was going to be a difficult one to cast for a voice, because, you know, Matt, you know, ostensibly was me. So, you know, I needed somebody who could read like me, you know, and so there are sections in the book which are letters that Matthew writes to Holly and his daughter, and those are really important sections, because they are Matthew trying to figure out how to apologize or how to make things right with her, and trying to work through the reasons why he did what he did, and meanwhile, you know, Holly, really what Holly wants is just her dad around. She doesn't care about those things. So really he's writing the letters for himself, but he's a broken guy, you know. And so when I got the and no diss to the actors who read the parts, and I, you know, but when I got the samples of, I think, 3 or 4 actors who read the letters, they just sounded really confident, or like movie actors, or, you know, they just sounded like nothing like Matthew would sound. And so I remember emailing the producer, the director of the audiobook, and just telling, it's Lisa, and I just, from HarperCollins, Lisa, this is not it. This is not Matthew. And he said, well, what does he sound like? And I said, well, I'll record one of the letters and I'll send it to you, and this is how I think he sounds like. So I recorded one of the letters and I sent it to her, and I just said, this is Matthew. Like, this is, you know, Matthew is completely broken, and he's, you know, and I was broken at the time. So it was easy for me to do that, you know, and so she emailed back, you know, pretty quickly, well, you should just read the letters. And so I ended up going into the studio and reading the letters that Matthew wrote Holly in the book. And I think it turned out, I actually haven't listened to the audiobook, so I don't know how it turned out, but I'd read Blackwater, you know, I did that whole book. So I had a bit of, and I did the podcast, so I had a bit of experience working in the studio. Yeah, I think it turned out, from what I've heard, it turned out, you know, it turned out well, like that part of it. And we had a great actress read the book. So hopefully the letters complemented her work.
Gotcha. Well, we have a sort of a reader question related to that, I guess. And for anyone, I don't know, you can tune out or whatever if you haven't finished reading the book, because it does sort of deal with stuff at the end. But like I said, I feel like we're far enough along from the launch that we can sort of delve into spoiler-ish territory. But talking about the use of italics in Michael's letters to Holly without numbering them as chapters, effective in the storytelling about the father-daughter relationship, and the question being sort of, why did you decide that she would burn them without even reading them at the end?
Because the letters were for him, and I think he realizes that at the end as well. I think he realizes that he was writing the letters for himself, so that he could figure out, you know, what was going on with him, and he could figure out why he fucked up so badly with her. And Holly, on the other side of it, when she saw the letters, she saw her dad, and she knew that that's who he needed. She needed her dad. She didn't need the letters. His presence there was his apology, you know, and their presence on the land, you know, and in that place was where they needed to be. They didn't need to be in the words that he wrote. They needed to be together on that place. And so I think her decision to burn the letters was, this is what I need. I don't need you to explain anything more to me. I just need my dad here with me, and you're here. And so I felt like it was now originally she read them, you know, in the original draft. And then I have a great editor, Jen Lambert, and you know, we talked a lot about the letters, and we talked a lot about how the book would end. And I think it was, I don't know if it was either me or her, it was probably Jen who said, does she even need to read the letters at that point? Like, it seems a bit redundant because that's not the journey for Holly. And so I agreed with her, and so I think it turned out really beautifully. And I feel like I just picture like the ashes of the letter, kind of like flying up like embers and joining in the dance. So I think it's a really pretty and appropriate way to end the letters, is to have her do that.
That's a great answer. We had so many sort of questions that I could sort of spin out from here, about book design, about the title, about the theme, about the writing process, all that kind of stuff. I don't even know. I'm not exactly 100% sure where to start. I mean,
you want to do the title?
Sure. I mean, that's probably an easy one, right? Like, as some people don't realize that, a lot of times authors don't pick the title.
Yeah, well, this one I did, and I fought for it a little bit, just because the title. I mean, the title comes from a few places. One of them is like, the book is really, and we talked about this before, Ben, is the book is like an homage to a lot of things, but one of them is to music, and the role that music has played in my life, the role that music has played in my life as an author, and really how music helped save my life, like, during some really, really bad times in the last couple of years, along with other things, obviously. But and so I really wanted to write a book that was a tribute to the bands and music and people that really brought me out of a really dark place.
And some of which populate the book too.
Absolutely, yeah. And originally the first draft of the book had a lot of lyrics quoted, and Jen was like, my editor, she said, Dave, you have to pay for these all, and so we had to do a little bit of fancy footwork there. Luckily, John Sampson is a friend of mine, and was able to just very kindly let me use some of his lyrics for the book. And then I did end up forking out some money to use Sufjan Stevens' lyrics, which, those lyrics mean a lot to me. There's 3 songs I listened to a lot when my dad died, and Ascension by Sufjan Stevens was one of them. So anyway, so the title, though, came from, one of the parts came from was a song from the Theory of Crows, a song from the National called Theory of the Crows. And I just love that title so much. It always resonated with me. I've always had a fascination with crows. And then I was listening to a podcast that Dave Ridgen hosts and writes, called Someone Knows Something. And I think it's season 4 or 5, in the first episode, where he talks about this thing where the crows can remember faces. And there's even a theory where, like, they can pass down the recognition of faces to subsequent generations. And I just thought that is such a cool thought. And if I believe in blood memory, which is, that I can remember a place even though I'd never been there before, then why can't the land remember me? And how would that manifest itself? And I just thought it was such a beautiful image to think about, birds, animals, like, welcoming you because they remember you even though you'd never been there before. And so I kind of put it all together, and that's where the title came from. It's a theory. The theory is that crows remember faces. So if my dad lived there, they would remember me.
Angela, did you want to jump in with a question or anything? I've got a million questions. So
Angela's muted.
Angela's unmuted now. It just took her a second because she was hitting the wrong microphone icon. We talked about this before, David. One of the things that I really found interesting was the way you put Holly and Matthew together in a car for the journey, and that became their space to sort of talk and not talk through things. Is that intentional? Is that something that you found worked with your own kids, sort of having that safe space where people are looking straight ahead and can say what they need to say?
Yeah, I think it's like, I think that in a car journey, you can talk, you can sit comfortably in silence, or you can talk through the things that you say with music, you know. And
Mhm.
so I feel like that their connection, you know, began to really strengthen again after being broken in the car, you know. So whether it was on the car on the way to the funeral home or a long trip to Norway House from Winnipeg, it was just a safe place for them to reconnect or to ease into their reconnection. And you know, you can, like, you know, I've made so many mixtapes for people, and you know, like you can like play a song and try to tell someone something with the songs that you play. And so, you know, one of the times that they really start talking in the car into Norway House is just talking over little trivia things about a song that they're listening to, and they kind of swap trivia about different songs that they listen to. And I think that's a very human thing. It's a very realistic thing, and it's a way in which they can kind of like begin to kind of maybe come together and recognize some things in each other that they had forgotten.
Yeah, to find each other without having to sit down across a table and say, okay, let's fix this. It became very natural. It read very natural.
Yeah, thank you. No, I used to really like struggle with dialogue actually when I was. And I think that dialogue is something I really enjoy writing now. But when I was a younger writer, dialogue was something I really struggled with, and I worked really, really hard to try and improve in that area. But sometimes I think you're right, Angela. You need to know what they can say without words as well. And I think that's also a part of the trick.
And have you found, as you've written more dialogue, that your habits have changed, maybe as a listener, as an observer of the human, you know, the human interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that one of the things that writers do or ought to do is just to, like, I mean, you observe the world because anything is potentially a story, but you listen to people. You become almost like a professional eavesdropper, you know. So because you need to know how people talk, you need to know the different affectations that people use and different like vocabulary that you know, that people incorporate into their own speech. You need to know what people say and how they react to certain things with words and actions. So you need to really become an expert in human interactions, you know, and you do that by observation and listening and learning through that. So absolutely, I think that part of, you know, my evolution into becoming a better writer of dialogue is through listening to people talk, but also by reading really good writers, you know. So like I've learned a lot from very good writers, you know, like you know, Miriam Toews is one of my heroes, and like I think Miriam Toews, the way she writes is like mind blowing to me. You know, I read her stuff and I don't really believe, you know, like how good she is. I can't, you know, like I believe it because she is, but it's almost like, oh, you know, like how do you do that, you know? So but reading her helps me to improve, you know. But when I was younger, I read a lot of Copeland, and you know, he helped me become a better writer. I loved one of the reviews, I think it might have been the Free Press review of Theory of Crows, that compared some of the writing in Theory of Crows to Copeland's writing. And I thought that was, I kind of smiled at that one because, you know, he was a big influence in my, you know, when I was younger. I read most of his books, and I loved the way he wrote. And so I think that this is kind of getting off from dialogue thing, but I think the writers you really love, it's impossible not to incorporate some of the things that they do in your own stuff. And then you take like the smatterings of all these different writers, and you kind of form that into your own voice, you know. And so I feel like, you know, whether it's Salinger or Hemingway or Copeland or Toews, or, you know, all of these people have, I think, found their crept their way into my own writing. And, you know, I don't think I'll ever be as good as any of them, but they definitely have helped me, you know, in my own writing journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to Nicholas Herring last week, who was here on Friday, I guess this past Friday,
Friday, yeah.
launching his book or talking about his book, Some Hellish, and he's from PEI, and I've been to PEI numerous times, and the dialogue in his book is just like so pitch perfect in terms of how you would hear islanders, especially like lobster fishermen and stuff, talking. And he said that he used the exact same word. You've got to be, or the exact same term. You've got to be a really good eavesdropper, where you're just sort of absorbing things around you. And it might seem like just such a throwaway little phrase or sentence that someone says, but it can just like have such a hook somewhere further down the line in some way that you might not even recognize yet, and you just sort of hang on to it and put it in your pocket and use it later.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's true even with like, movies and things that you watch. I think there's some parts, if you're really, really attentive and you watch the right movies, there's some parts in this book where you'll read and you'll think, oh, this kind of reminds me of that. And I think that a lot of that's intentional. But so I think yeah, there's a lot of inspirations for this novel.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to circle way back to, because we were talking about crows, and we were talking about crows as a metaphor for memory from the land, and of the land as a powerful symbol. And we had some incredible reader or viewer questions, book club member questions, I guess, that had to do with that in particular, the images of the crows that surface and resurface, and asking sort of, are these images grounded in your actual experience, and sort of, maybe how they're related to the idea of the raven as a trickster, which, being a smart creature, but making, mistakes and not learning from them as well. And then sort of, yeah, that sort of, I guess, related for me back to Matthew in one of his letters says, you become the land. And so there was that relationship again between, flora and fauna and the people that inhabit it, so to speak. And it pops up not only in crows, but also in, in bears coming and going, and Matthew's dad talking to the bear, and then the one that shows up, later on, which Holly sees, the whale, and all of this incredible animal imagery that sort of runs throughout the book that just really ties things together nicely. I realized I did not form that in the form of a question, but yeah, to you to sort out.
Well, I think with the crows, there's probably readers that are a lot smarter than I am that, will pull a lot. I think the great thing about stories is that you can take meaning from a story that I did not intend, and it doesn't make it any less valid, So, and that's the beauty. That's one of the beauties of stories, is that I can tell you what I meant from what I wrote, but if you took something different from it, it doesn't invalidate either one of us. Like I love that you can draw meaning from something, because you bring your own life experiences to stories, and so they speak to you in different ways. And I really love that. For the crows, and in a lot of ways, like for me, they're a foreshadowing device. There's this kind of like representation of connection that we have to the land and the gifts that it provides, and this whole like imagery of becoming enveloped by them in the darkness, and that that phrase that you had quoted before about becoming the land. I think one of the things at the end of the book is that it's very open-ended, but Matt becomes enveloped by the darkness, but the darkness is not necessarily a bad thing at that point. And I think that's interesting, and so there's a little bit of that. And then, but I did intentionally, with the ending especially, leave it open, because I want people to take Matt and Hallelujah, and I want them to live within their hearts and their minds, so like I have ideas about where they went from there, but other people will have different ideas about where their lives go from that moment, and what happened with them. And I love that they can live on in people's own lives in different ways. So so, but with the whales and the, the whales and the bears, whales, I just love, like whales make me cry. They're so beautiful, so I like whales. I had some experiences with whales, or my children did, on a few trips that we had. And, I wanted to, I wanted to use those really beautiful moments in the book. So, a lot of that is very close to real life, so, and bears are, I mean, there's a very spiritual connection to bears in the book. And there's a very spiritual connection to bears in my life, so my dad used to tell me that, the bear is a relative of our families. And so, and if we talk to the bears, then they will talk to us. Like they are very close to our family. And, like my dad used to live out in the land, and they used to hunt and fish and snare and trap. And one of the things they would never hunt is a bear, because the bear is our family. So I just wanted to pay tribute to, our connection to the bear and what the bear means to me and my father, and use them in really, I felt really profound and really, I don't know, like just really beautiful ways, I guess, and, so like the last scene with the bear and Holly in the dream, I think is a really, really beautiful kind of moment, where he kind of saves them in a little bit, and so anyway, I just felt like that. That's why I wrote the bear, and the recurring, the recurring image of the bear, and a question about whether or not the bear is the bear is a bear, or the bear is supernatural, or the bear, and I like that too. Like you can decide that for yourself as well.
All right. Well, it's interesting that obviously there are some things about this book that do run fairly parallel to your life in some ways, and others obviously not so much, but that you are feeling comfortable with people, reading this and taking away from it what they will, and sort of, drawing their own conclusions, thinking about what might happen in the future. Was that difficult for you at first, or you were like, there was never a point where you were like, okay, this is what it means, I know, because this is in part sort of shaped by my own life and what have you? Or was it always just sort of like, people can take away from this what they will?
I think it was always it, but I feel like I knew that when I wrote the book that I would make a lot of connections with people. And I have, and because we have a shared humanity. So the things that I'm writing about that are about anxiety, about grief, loss, depression, about the relationship between parents and children, the journeys that we go on to find ourselves, the healing that we have to do. Like these things are things that we share and that I think most people can relate to. And so, the theory of crows, I mean, it's very, I mean, I would say it's like a lot of people have called it autofiction. I think that's like not far from the truth. Like there's a lot in the theory of crows, which is directly from my life, and so I've been, in that way, I've been doing that since I started. I've been doing that for the last 14 years. So I'm very comfortable giving of myself in that way. I think that I found over the course of my career that, being open about my own struggles has allowed me to reach people, and for people to feel open about their own struggles as well as a result. And so that's been something that I've done more and more in my career, because I feel like it's important for people who are struggling to know that they aren't struggling alone. And so because I've been lucky enough to, to develop a platform, that if I'm open about what I'm going through and I can reach, a bunch of people, and be open about what I'm going through, then other people who are going through something similar, I think it means a lot to know that someone feels what you feel. And so I'm aware of that when I write, and with the Theory of Crows and with Blackwater, I get a lot of emails about those two books, and I get a lot of people in person who come up to me after, you know, readings from the Theory of Crows, and who have just come up and who just kind of have just like cried with me, you know, because they've just lost their parents, and reading the book has helped them in some small way, you know, cope with that loss. And that means more to me than anything, you know. It means more to me than the book selling, you know, a ton of copies. It means more to me than, you know, if it ever wins any awards. If it reaches somebody in that way and helps them overcome something that I know hurts, then that's something that I can't put really any value on. I can't quantify what that kind of means to me. You know, so, and that's to me what means most about this book, and about Blackwater too, you know, and so, you know, being open in that way, I think has you know, is very deliberate, and I think that people take in those ways, take the story exactly how I thought they would take it, because if I talk about depression, then I know that people with depression are going to connect with it, you know. So I think it's in some ways the story is open for you to, you know, live with it in the way that, you know, and take from it in different ways than I intended, or in different ways that, you know, I wrote it, and what I was feeling when I wrote it, what I meant when I wrote it. But in other ways, I think in the most important ways, I was very deliberate in what I wrote and what I intended for it, and what I thought people would take from it. It's a very intimate and emotional book, you know, but that intimacy is shared, you know, and that I think that connection is really powerful.
Yeah. Angela, did you want to jump in with anything at this point?
That actually covered the question that I really wanted to ask. What was it, what you thought about the response of the readers and the role of the reader when you were writing such a nuanced but open and giving book like this? Because I know, like, Chris Hall, our co-owner, and I read the book ahead of time at the exact same time, and he and I had very different emotional responses, both very emotional responses, but to completely different parts. So does that something, like, do you find with writing an adult novel like this that you think more about what the response of the reader is going to be, how you envision that, versus when you write the intermediate or children's novels, or is it the same approach?
I think it's the same. You know, I think there's like, I feel like one of the things that I think people appreciate in my work is that it's like the emotional honesty, you know, of my work. And so whether it's in a middle grade fantasy, or whether it's some nonfiction, whether it's adult literary fiction, whether it's a picture book, I feel like if anything, in all the stories that I write, I've put myself out there in a really authentic ways, and I've tried to be emotionally honest with my stories, and to go places that are uncomfortable, because I feel like it serves the story. But more than that, it helps, you know, myself, and it helps other people. And my dad always used to say that the things that you do, whatever you do, the top of mind is you should be doing the things that, you know, you should be doing things that help people above anything else. And so so that's what I try to do with the stories that I write. And, you know, there's people I probably haven't helped when they've written my book, and that's totally fine. But I know that there are people that I've helped in some way. And yeah, and so that's something that, you know, it really means a whole lot to me. Yeah, I don't know. There's another thought I had there, but I lost it. So, but yeah.
It took us about towards the end of the book before we realized that he was reading it as a dad and I was reading it as a mom, and that's why we were responding equally emotionally, but from completely different places, which was interesting. That hasn't really happened with a book before that we've both read.
You know,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me too, as a reader, like, you know, and as a dad. I had not thought of that before, as a dad with a teenage daughter, to boot. Yeah, now that you mention that, Angela, that's a really good point. I did not think about sort of my preconceived notions or my life experience or whatever coming into this, and being angry at Matt, but at the same time sort of understanding the disconnect between father and daughter and stuff like that in a way that like someone like you, Angela, might approach it completely, or some other reader, or a teen, or for that matter, like that's fascinating.
Well, it's just like people try to fill that emptiness with different things, so whether it's alcohol, or whether it's medication, or whether it's making bad choices, and we have to learn how to fill it in healthier ways, and I think that's part of what Matthew has to do as well. What my thought was before, Angela, was that I was just doing an interview earlier today about crows with a magazine, and the person who's interviewing me, who read it, let me know that after they read the book, the first thing they did was hug it against their heart. I feel like I want to bottle that, in some way, but that that's but I feel like that's what, like, I just love books, because I finish so many books, and I'm just like, I just start, like, I cry, or I'm laughing, or I'm I don't know, I just, there's such a comfort in so many ways, stories. I just feel so grateful that, like, I can do this, I don't know, like, I feel like in some ways there's still a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't really feel like, I see, like, my book on a bestseller list, and I think, what is going on here, but and it's at the same time, when I can have moments like that, that maybe makes up for that, feeling of, like, I don't know, displacement, or whatever you might call it. I don't know, but
yeah, there's not really a price you can put on that kind of stuff. Well, I've gotten I got the 5-minute warning from Erin a little while ago. She had to do some, she had to tweak her Zoom stuff because her connection was not good, hence the fact that she's a giant W now. But before we wrap up, I thought maybe it might be worth sort of talking a little bit about the work that you're doing now, because I think since we last talked was when you took on a new position, in terms of getting new Indigenous writers, and in particular books for kids, I guess, sort of out on the market. But before you talk about that, I know that we've talked many times, mostly by Zoom and by phone. Only once, like I said, we met in person. But we're both sort of avowed nerds, and you've always bugged me to I have a Star Wars helmet that
are you gonna put it on?
You always told me you wanted me to wear, so I'm gonna put it on right now.
Oh no. Hey.
That's
Why don't you just talk a little bit about
Oh.
no, I feel like
I have that exact Lego helmet on my writing desk right now.
okay, well, there you go. See, that's our nerd quotient has been met. Yeah, talk a little bit about sort of the work that you're doing, as in your new position, and maybe sort of what you've got on the go in terms of writing and stuff too. If you
Ben, I could honestly, like, say for 1 second, I can't take you seriously in a helmet, but I literally can. Like, it doesn't distract me at all. I just think your coolness has, like, tripled right now. So here's the thing. And again, like, I've never, if you know me, I'm really, I'm never one to ever pat myself on my back, or I don't think I'm any big deal. I really don't. I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I'm just I'm a regular guy. I don't know, I know, I guess I shouldn't say I don't know. I know why I've done well. I worked really hard. But, like, I feel like I'm here because other people came before me that did really amazing things. So whether it's Thomas King, or Beatrice Maisonnier, or Lee Maracle, Maria Campbell, people that I've looked up to and opened doorways for me to do what I do. And, and other colleagues of mine who are dear friends of mine to do what they do. So whether it's Katharina Vermette or Sri Demaline or Eden Robinson or, Wab Canoe or Wabgisha Grice or, we're here because of them. Like there's no question, and so I feel like we have to do the same thing. We have to do what we can to, representation extends to also how our representation as writers in mainstream literature opens doorways for the younger generations to become successful. And so I really take that seriously. And I know that, I've been really successful, not just as an Indigenous writer, as a writer, but I am Cree and I am Indigenous. And so I've been thinking a lot over the last couple of years about ways that I can open doorways for other writers to to find them a platform to tell their stories and share their stories to an audience. And because there's a lot of space that still needs to be filled by diverse writers. And so I got the opportunity originally with Cherie Demaline, who's one of my best friends, and we were talking with Penguin about starting an imprint. And so Cherie, because Cherie's Cherie, and she is like setting the world on fire right now. What's that?
Is it out yet?
She has like
That's amazing.
She has like 50 books coming out this year. So Venco and Funeral Song for Dying Girls, and so she's a force of nature, and she didn't have time to be completely hands-on with this imprint we were talking about. And so I told her that I would continue on with it, and she's there as a sounding board, or when I need support if I need her. But I was able to work out with Penguin a deal where I could start my own imprint, and just my vision for this imprint is very clear. I want to publish books for children, because children are literally the future. So the more we prepare children to do good things in our communities, the better off we'll all be. The best way that we can prepare them is give them stories so they can learn, and they can learn how to act, to change things for the better. And so that's point number one. And the other one was to make sure that the only books that I publish are by Indigenous writers and Indigenous artists and Indigenous graphic designers and Indigenous editors. And so that's the vision for this imprint. And I'm really feel really grateful that I have the opportunity to do that. It's the first one like it in Canada. And there's only one other like it in the States called Heart Drum by Cynthia Leitich Smith. And so that's what it is. So it's funny. Like I finally in the summer, I was like, oh, I can finally, after 14 years, I can work full time as a writer. I made it, and then I took a job right away, but this is like a job that really means a lot to me. And I feel like it's an important role. And I feel really blessed that I have the opportunity to do it. But I just want to create opportunities, and I want to put stories out there in the world that will help people. And I want to help more and more artists get a book published that in an industry that's really hard to break into, and so hopefully I can do that. But I'm working with great people at Penguin. I have a great team at Tundra, and they're amazing. And I think that as much as you think that Penguin is this big corporation that steps on the little people, I know the people there. They're really amazing people, and they're doing really good things. and they really care. And that means that I wouldn't work with them otherwise. So they've given me this opportunity, and I think we're going to do really good things with it.
Cool. And in terms of your own writing?
I have a lot of projects on the go. Like, I have 2 adult books that are coming out in the next several years, follow up to the Theory of Crows. The Theory of Crows is going to end. Those characters you won't see again in literature. But there's 2 books that are coming out that'll be my next 2 adult books with HarperCollins. I have a bunch of projects with Penguin, with Tundra. So I have the last 3 books of the Mississauga Saga series. I have a couple of picture books coming out in the next few years that are my follow-ups to On the Trapline and When We Were Alone. I have a graphic novel. I have a hockey book with Highwater Press. I have a chapter book, early years chapter book series with Penguin as well, about a Indigenous detective young girl. So there's a lot of projects on the go. I think I have about 10 to 12 different books, or maybe more, that I have coming out over the next 4 to 5 years. And then after that, maybe I'll take a break for a year or 2. But
Yeah, right.
maybe I probably won't though. But I like doing this, so I probably won't stop. If people stop reading my work, maybe I'll slow down a bit and just write a bit for myself. But no, I love doing it. I don't really get tired by it. I'm really grateful for people actually wanting to publish my work. So I have probably taken on too much.
No, not you. Well, if it slows down, then you can always revert back to your self-published book or self-published work that you dug up.
Yeah. I'll give that one an edit, and we'll see what that one does.
We'll talk.
To check our archives.
You can figure this out.
Yeah, please don't.
Erin's back. That means time is up.
Yeah. Sorry that I had to drop off there. My internet kept saying unstable, so I thought I'll turn off my video and see if that helps. But thank you all so much for that amazing discussion. I really loved the book, and I just love hearing you talk about it. So thank you, David, for your time. I know you're a very busy guy, so we really appreciate you coming back. Just briefly, next month's pick, Wonder World. Oh, blurry. Come on, how do I do this? Oh, Ben's got it. Okay, you got it. Yeah, we're super excited to have K.R. Bigden come. It's a really short book. It's less than 200 pages, but it's a short month, so it's like we planned that. And then on Friday, there be an email coming out with all of our spring book picks. We have a really awesome slate of books for spring and summer, so we're really excited to let you know what's coming up. So keep an eye on your inbox on Friday for that email. And I think that's it for us tonight. So thank you again, Ben, Angela, and David, and we will see you all again next month. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.